Some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
On tonight's Mark Steyn Show, how bad is it going to get? How fast? And in the many British institutions that no longer function, the coppers, the courts, can it be turned around? One of my very favourite broadcasters is here, Sue Cook, to talk about the striking barristers. Laura Perrins is a barrister. Not sure whether she's on strike, but if so, she's crossed the picket line to talk about record high energy bills, close to record high inflation, and all the other fun stuff waiting in Liz Truss's in tray. She'll be chewing that over with Jasmine Birtles. And Toby Young is here too to ponder if the British Constabulary can stop doing the Macarena long and... Oh no, don't put it on. I don't want to see another copper. The Macarena was bad enough at the time. 30 years past its sell-by date to see these leaden, arrhythmic, flat-footed plods doing it. There, that's the Londonderry Macarena. They won't do the Londonderry. If you want to dance, learn the Paso Doble or the Mambo or something proper. Okay, enough of that. The most important part of the show, as always, is you. So let me know what you think. Would you like to see the Police Service of Northern Ireland doing the Paso Doble or the Merengue? You can let me know, GBViews at gbnews.uk, or you can tweet me at GBNews. We're the People's Channels. If we don't hear from the people, we're not doing it right. Fire away, have at it. All that after the latest headlines with Simon Pusey.
Thanks, Mark. I'm Simon Pusey in the GB newsroom. Former Manchester United footballer Ryan Giggs faces a possible retrial after a jury failed to reach a verdict in his domestic violence case. The 48-year-old has denied physical assault and coercive behaviour against his ex-girlfriend Kate Greville. He's been released on bail until a hearing next week. Military ties between the UK and Australia are being strengthened, with the two countries training together. Australians will join the Royal Navy on 5 new submarines, including HMS Anson, which was built at a cost of £1.3 billion. It follows the trilateral agreement with the US, a partnership which the Prime Minister says will help secure jobs in Britain.
That is the first time we've ever done something like this, and that's part of this massive deal that we've done with Australia and with America, the AUKUS program so that together we hope to be building the next generation of submarines after this one that will be driving jobs and growth in Barrow and elsewhere for really decades and decades to come.
For the first time in her reign, the Queen will stay in Scotland to appoint a new Prime Minister next week. Boris Johnson and his successor will travel to Balmoral instead of the traditional meeting at Buckingham Palace. The announcement comes in the last few days of the Tory leadership race, with Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak going head-to-head for the final hustings in London later tonight. New figures show food prices are rising at the fastest rate since the financial crisis in 2008. The British Retail Consortium says the annual increase in fresh food costs jumped to 10.5%, up from 8% in July, with milk and margarine among the products worst affected. The war in Ukraine is being blamed for the additional pressure on prices. More travel chaos is expected with another round of rail strikes being announced. Members of the train drivers' union ASLEF are planning to walk off the job on September the 15th, which will affect 12 companies. Another union, the TSSA, has also announced workers from another 9 train companies are also taking industrial action on the 26th. The funeral of the Soviet Union's last leader, Mikhail Gorbachev, will take place on Saturday. That's according to Russian news agencies. The Kremlin is yet to decide whether it will be a state funeral. World leaders have been paying tribute to Mr. Gorbachev, who helped to end the Cold War. The European Union is making it harder for Russians to travel to the EU. Foreign ministers have agreed to suspend a visa deal with Moscow. The move means it'll be more expensive for Russians to travel to the EU, and there'll be longer waiting times for applications to be processed. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to Mark Steyn.
Fantastic. So new sanctions on Russia because the price of gas isn't quite high enough per megawatt hour. The whole continent's going to be sharing 1 megawatt hour between them because that's all they'll be able to afford. Ladies and gentlemen, the purported leader of the free world threatening his fellow citizens, or at least those who happen to be gun owners.
And for those brave right-wing Americans who say it's all about keeping America's independent and safe. If you want to fight against a country, you need an F-15. You need something a little more than a gun. No, I'm not joking. Think about this. Think about the rationale we use.
An F-15, by the way, is an American fighter jet. Joe Biden is saying that these days, if you want to stand up to the government of the United States, it's not enough to rely on Smith & Wesson. You got to have the big stuff. Mr. Biden is modifying Hilaire Belloc. Whatever happens, we have got the F-15 and they have not. It shouldn't be necessary to point out, even to brain-dead Joe, that if you think about the rationale, as he puts it, this is total bunkum. Almost exactly a year ago, Joe Biden and his alleged global hyperpower, the guys who account for over 40% of the planet's military spending, were defeated, humiliated, by goat herds with fertilizer. The world's most lavishly funded, quote-unquote, intelligence agency, the CIA, cautioned that Kabul could fall to the Taliban within 90 days. In fact, it fell to the Taliban within 90 hours, but that's close enough for government work. The Taliban took Afghanistan while the US Secretary of State was tweeting about his productive talks with the Canadian Foreign Minister. Now the Taliban has fighter jets, because the great Satan, as it scuttled out of town, left enough hardware to make the fire-breathing mullahs the 8th or 9th biggest military power on the planet. They don't really need any of those jets. They like to climb into them once in a while. They don't know which buttons you push to make them go. But they like letting the Chinese generals inspect the state-of-the-art stuff when the Politburo jets in from Peking. Nothing works. Over there, or here at home. Over there, far away, the world's most lavishly funded military loses to illiterate goat herds. Right here, closer to home, the price of gas hits an all-time record high. Look at this, German power rises to record 800 euros per megawatt hour. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. 800 euros was the all-time record high at the weekend. By Monday, I'm terribly sorry. By Monday, we had a new all-time record high. Look at this one here. Europe's benchmark power price breaks 1,000 euros for first time. That's 10 times higher than what it was a year ago, and the rate of increase is galloping. It's going up about 10% a day in Germany. Do I hear 1,200 euros? Oh yeah, here we are. La République Française, quote, French wholesale electricity prices have surged in recent days to record highs, with the year-ahead baseload power price at a record high of 1,200 euros per megawatt hour. I was thinking the other day of the third Viscount Palmerston, mainly because it's less distressing than thinking about Boris Johnson or Keir Starmer, Jacinda Trudeau or Justin Ardern. Lord Palmerston famously said, oh, there he is. Look at that. Can we get some mutton chops on the next Prime Minister? Can we get Liz Truss in mutton chops? That's what we need. That's what we need to save the day. Lord Palmerston famously said that England had no eternal allies or perpetual enemies, only eternal interests. Conventional powers still think like that. And whatever you think of them, China and Russia are in that sense very conventional powers. They have eternal interests, and they pursue them very single-mindedly. In the Western world, we have replaced eternal interests with eternal attitudes. And once we strike those attitudes, they're forever. If you want a picture that sums it up, here is the heir to the thrones of the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Jamaica, Papua New Guinea, Belize, on and on. I could just list them all until the top of the hour. Here he is, following the science all the way to a talismanic Swedish schoolgirl. That is pathetic, and it ought to be disqualifying. In good times, it's heartwarming or hilarious, according to taste, but it's not so funny when times aren't good, when inflation is up to 10, no, 13, wait a minute, 17, no, oh, look at this here. UK inflation could top 22%, Goldman Sachs warns. Let's see, when was the last time UK inflation hit 22.4%? Oh, 1975. That was a different world. We were still more or less a conventional nation-state pursuing Lord Palmerston's eternal interests. Now we're striking our eternal attitudes. As we reported yesterday, the German agriculture minister says starvation is subordinate to climate change policy. So you're starving to death, but that's good for the planet. They mean it. They say it openly. And they do so because, as one viewer put it the other day, these days a beaten and cowed citizenry turn to the state for handouts before they turn on the state. So the eternal attitudes remain. In order to show how much we care about sea levels in the Maldives in the 22nd century, Europe mortgaged its energy needs to the Kremlin. So when our leaders then decided that Tsar Putin must be brought to his knees, it was pretty obvious that you would be on your knees long before Vlad ever is. Still in all, it's interesting to me that both American and German politicians are now basically threatening their own citizens, and the French president is declaring that the age of abundance is over. I don't recall him using that as his election slogan 6 months ago. Let me know what you think. GBViews at gbnews.uk. Laura Perrins is co-editor of The Conservative Woman. I like to start my mornings with that. It's an excellent website. And Jasmine Birtles is the founder of The Money Magpie. And Jasmine, you're a great optimist usually, and even as everything collapses, you're full of positive tips you can do to prevent yourself going total. You may still go 9/10 under, but there'll be a little bit of you peaking up just above the surface. But you're surely, I mean, these numbers are incredible. It's surely getting more difficult to be optimistic.
It is hard. I mean, as you say, I am an optimist, but I'm also a realist, and my feeling is that we need to look at things, you know, as realistically as we possibly can, and then we go, OK, what do we do with this? How are we going to cope? And it is getting harder. I have to say that the 22% figure, that is closer to what I've been thinking inflation was for the last, well, at least for the last year. Yeah. Certainly in the year before, I was saying we're going to have inflation and it's not going to be just a little blip, which is what the Bank of England was saying, as you remember. Oh, it'll be over by the spring, it'll be up to about 6%. And no, and I was shouting at the television. Yes, way different now. And what, I just keep feeling quite irritated by what is being said by our central bank, the Bank of England, and by government. For example, there's Andrew Bailey, the governor of the Bank of England, saying the science is settled. Where have we heard that before? Yeah. The science is settled. Inflation does not come from printing money. Yes, it does. Yes, it does. And we had an article today in the Times from Steve Baker and Steve Hankey, and Steve Hankey is a huge name in economics and certainly currency. And they have said, yes, it is. You print money, you create inflation. It's not the only thing for our inflation, but it is the fundamental.
Well, that 22.4% isn't quite a record. I think in 1975 it hit 24.1 or whatever. But I would imagine that we are heading for a record inflation. And if you'd said this is going to be worse than 70s inflation, that eroded everybody's savings. Laura, we're about to get a new Prime Minister. And it either matters or it doesn't. Because who cares whether, she's going to be kissing hands in Balmoral or Windsor or Buckingham Palace, as our news department is apparently fascinated by. I have no idea why that should be of any interest at all. But what matters is that she's got to actually do something to fix all this. Is that within the realm of possibility?
Well, I mean, I think it's going to be difficult for her, but you have to hope something can be done. I mean, I think an acknowledgement of all the bad government decisions that have been made up until now to cause this would certainly be necessary. I think both candidates have now are recognising the damage that lockdown has done, both to the economy and to lots of other sectors in society, particularly education and health. And it's true that, I mean, Johnson repeatedly blames Putin and the conflict in Ukraine, which of course is a factor, but it's not just Putin's invasion, it's also of course the West's reaction to it. And so far Boris Johnson's policy decision seems to be, sorry Britons, take the pain. I mean, that is literally the slogan. We're in this for the long haul. I don't know how bad it has to get for people to say, there is no more pain for me to take. You must support Ukraine as much as possible in terms of seeking the very best terms, but that this isn't seen as, a terrible thing to do to try and bring that conflict to the end. To an end. Otherwise, I mean, the inflation figures keep going up. As you said, the Bank of England have been running, don't worry about it, we won't get into a recession. Well, it'll be a technical recession. Oh, it looks like it's going to be a full recession, and inflation is out of control. So I think Liz Truss is going to have to do more than tell all the voters just to take the pain.
Well, when you get up to those inflation rates that they're talking about, it's real pain, not just for the underclass or for poor people or whatever, but it cuts way deep, well into the middle class. I mean, are people willing to actually starve for Ukraine, as Boris Johnson told Zelensky that the people of the United Kingdom would be happy to do?
I don't think they are. I think the support for Ukraine is waning. I've been around the country a bit recently, and I do see the Ukrainian flags here and there. But you are seeing more in the media, a few little question marks about where the money's going, question marks about Zelensky, question marks about whether it is as we're being told. So it is starting to wane. And I do think that once people get hungry, not only will their support wane, but they will take to the streets. And this is what's being talked about at the moment. So whoever does become our new Prime Minister, if it is Liz Truss, that's one of the big things she's going to have to cope with, actual fighting and big protests.
Well, why then is the political class of the West in this situation where they're talking about energy rationing in France and Germany, and at the same time half the Western world has decided, oh wait a minute, things aren't quite miserable enough yet, we're suddenly going to decide to put an end to 12,000 years of agriculture because that's destroying the planet. own great nation, Laura. The Irish have decided we're not going to sit around and wait for the English to inflict another famine on us. We're going to impose our own famine on Ireland.
Yes, well, I mean, I've actually just spent the week in Ireland, but I obviously still follow the news, and there seems to be a huge, they've essentially declared the war on the farmers, and they're saying, that you cannot produce any more beef in years to come if we want to, get down to net zero. I mean, cattle is absolutely, and cattle farming is absolutely integral to Ireland. It would be the end of their economy if things went that far. But again, the other question is, do the Western governments really have mandates for such extreme, net zero policies? Do they have a mandate to essentially sacrifice their poorest and some of their middle class in terms of fighting this conflict in the Ukraine? I would say no. I mean, this is a flight of fancy. I think Boris Johnson it's typical his Churchillian sort of fantasy that he has about himself is that he thinks he's fighting this great conflict and everybody else at home is just going to have to go along with it. I mean, it's all complete nonsense. It's complete nonsense. And I mean, I would imagine there'll have to be an emergency budget. And Liz Truss is talking about tax cuts. People say there needs to be more than tax cuts, and you need to target it at the poorest. But as you say, the middle class, they're taxed so high now, and if inflation really starts eating into their income, there won't be any tax revenue left for them to give, so that services can run at even a basic level, because a lot of public services now are quite poor, the NHS being the obvious example.
Yeah, I mean, this is the issue, isn't it? That we now need emergency measures. It's all very urgent. There's not really a lot of sense of urgency in these pathetic hustings they have every couple of days, are there?
No, there isn't. And yet there is a sense, there is emergency. We are hearing that 25% of the people in the UK are saying they won't put on their heating at all so that they can eat this winter. That's the way people are feeling. So I think unless this is really properly addressed and the golden calf of net zero is thrown off its table, and that we don't sacrifice children, old people, poor people, people on middle incomes to this whole net zero view, unless we do that, we're going to have horrendous problems over the winter.
Well, we're not even talking about, I mean, we're talking about it mainly in terms of the price cap and domestic energy bills. We're not even talking about businesses where some chip shop owner I heard on the radio today was saying that 1 in 3 fish and chip shops in London are going to close. I mean, once the pubs and the chippies start closing, what else is left?
Well, then, yeah, I mean, I've seen both of those stories. It's obviously incredibly serious for those business owners, and also schools, I believe, are going to have to face some very tough decisions. They are not protected by a price cap, so their energy bills will be astronomical, and how they'll balance the budgets. It will be difficult to see. But I've also noticed an overused phrase now in the media is "since records began." I don't know if you've noticed it. It's almost, you say it's since the mid-70s, but a lot of things seem to be the worst since records began. Right. And I mean, it's the way they say in the weather, and it just makes you feel uneasy. And it's like, again, is this our political class that has torched everything? That everything is as bad as since records began.
I mean, the thing about that is that they have torched everything. And it's getting kind of annoying. And I don't really know, people seem to think, oh, we can still have net zero and virtue signal and prostrate ourselves before Greta Thunberg. But if you would just give us some checks to get us through the winter. No, it's beyond that. You've got to put an end to all this rubbish.
Yeah, I agree. We do. We have to put an end to that. We have to put an end to the hemorrhaging money to the Ukraine and face the fact that we as a nation, our economy, without those two things even, is struggling. We've had an insane amount of money printing since 2008. Originally it went into the banks. put the price of houses up massively, beyond the ability to buy it for a lot of people. And then 2020 on steroids, printing. So, just that on its own, forget Ukraine, forget net zero even, that needs to be dealt with, and that's going to be a problem. But you add all this other stuff on top, and it's literally impossible for individuals to cope with.
Yeah, it's actually, at a certain point, it becomes unimaginable. Do you think Liz Truss understands the scale of the challenge, Laura?
Well, I'm not sure she does. I mean, I think it's going to get very difficult. I mean, you were saying some people are choosing not to heat their home and to eat instead. I mean, of course, there is a big movement also that people are saying we simply aren't going to pay the bills. And I think that will become real, and they will have to use some heating if it gets very, very cold. And, there are millions of families out there that, look, it's not a question of I won't pay. I simply cannot pay this bill. You can do whatever you wish. How Liz Truss will cope with it will remain to be seen, but she really needs to, I think, stand up to some of the mainstream media who has pushed this very extreme green agenda, for years. The kowtowing and the bowing down before Greta Thunberg it's been completely out of control. I remember her being interviewed on the Today programme on BBC, and I was like, this is not a proper interview.
No.
I mean, normally they ask proper questions, right, and hold them to account, but because she's young, it's like, just tell us what you want and we'll give it all to you. Well, I don't take policy decisions, from someone who's in their mid-teens. I mean, I don't think our government should either, but they all went sucking up to them because otherwise the mainstream media will call them mean.
No, I love the way whenever you give it I don't know, I'm not that worried about sea levels in the Maldives. Well, wait a minute, are you a climate scientist? No, I'm not actually. I'm a retired tap dancer. Well, then you have no right to express an opinion on this, unless you're a Scandinavian schoolgirl, and then whatever you say is gospel. I mean, this is the point. We are in one of those, I compared it the other night with those medieval villages where suddenly in the 15th century in some obscure Middle European village, everybody just started dancing frenziedly and wouldn't stop. And that's actually what you get. The entire governing class of the Western world has got that choreomania thing, and they just won't stop with the climate dance.
Well, absolutely, and it does seem to be that they're all saying the same thing. We had Build Back Better, and everybody, all these leaders, all saying Build Back Better, and then net zero, net zero, net zero, and you're hearing the same phrases over and over. And it's been called mass formation. I call it mass mesmerism, where it's a type of mass hypnosis among governments and among people, where we're just going along with something that is patently untrue, that is provably untrue, where you have actual scientists saying no, this is not true, and where we should have debate, and all debate has been crushed. It was crushed with COVID, it's now being crushed with net zero.
Is it mesmerism? Your pal James Delingpole, I heard you two talking together a couple of months ago on the radio, whatever it was, and he thinks it's not just mesmerism. He thinks these guys are all in on the scam.
I don't know if you need that sort of level of agreement. I mean, and also, I think, I mean, I certainly thought the COVID thing was completely, was mass hysteria, and most people actually supported the government in the more extreme measures. As I say to my children, I've never been more disappointed in you. So that was a straight up disappointment with the British public, I'm afraid. Because although you have to accept that they were bombarded by the media.
No. Rishi is backed off. He said he can't believe, he was disgusted. All this time in cabinet and all the stuff this guy Rishi Sunak was doing, and Rishi Sunak was the only one who spoke out against Rishi Sunak, according to Rishi Sunak.
The green agenda, I don't think the public are necessarily on board with, certainly the more extreme measures. And the other thing about the expertise thing is this has been going on for decades, but you get it very much with the COVID and very much with the green agenda is, what people do is they say, no, this area is for experts to cut it out of democratic debate. Unless you're scientist, unless you're professor whatnot and you've got your screens, you are not entitled to any debate or decision on whether or not you are going to have a gas boiler in your home, because there's the experts. And this goes on in many different areas of policy.
More and more.
To dump it all into areas of expertise, so therefore an ordinary person on the street, you can't decide. No, they can be given the information and then they make the decision.
And
that's what should happen.
Even scientists who have an opposing view
that's true.
accepted, they're not allowed a voice either. And you know, I think I have friends who go, don't talk to me about science. They're so angry at just the word science now.
Well, I mean, I think that shows a lot of the trust that's been eroded, is that this scientism has done a lot of damage to scientific debate.
Absolutely, and this whole rule, I mean, it's the famous William F. Buckley line that he'd rather be governed by the first 2,000 names in the Boston phone book than the faculty of Harvard University. I'd rather be governed by the first 2,000 headhunters from the jungles of New Guinea than the expert class we've had the last couple of years. Don't want them around at all. Thank you very much, Laura. Thank you, Jasmine. Coming up, we're going to get to your reaction, GBviews at gbnews.uk. And is it time for Britain's frankly useless coppers to stop doing the Macarena and the Samba and the Lambada and try doing a peeler? As in Sir Robert Peel. Toby Young's on that. And one of the great glories of British broadcasting, your pal and ours, Sue Cook is here. Don't go anywhere, we're coming right back.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
GB News is the People's Channel, so let's hear what the people are saying. Captain John Yassarian says, what and who do I blame for inflation? Remember when 12 million people were paid to stay home and it cost upwards of £70 billion? I think that might not have helped. Yeah, that's furlough. That was the furlough, isn't it? Being paid for furloughing. Everyone likes that. My kid said to me the other day he wants to go to university and do a module in furloughing because he thinks it's where the future is. Hollinwood says he blames COP26 and all its attendees who signed up to net zero. Yeah, the nations that weren't at COP26 and were berated for it. They look like the smart guys now. Deborah says the rot started back with Blair and Brown. and was exacerbated by Nick Clegg putting a halt to nuclear. Plus, the Tories have never had a proper energy policy. Leo says net zero policy is to blame, exacerbated by supply chain breakdowns caused by lockdowns and then accelerated by sanctions against Russia due to the Ukraine invasion. All the policy choices of governments. Yeah, that's the important thing to remember here. We're screwed because of policy choices by government. I would love it. You know, I don't want it to be like 1945 in France, where suddenly everyone claimed to have been in the resistance. But I noticed that whoever that guy is who's transport secretary is now doing a Rishi Sunak and saying, oh no, it wasn't just Rishi objecting to all this in cabinet. I objected to it too. I think there has to be a kind of formal repudiation. In my scenario, Boris is like the Nicolae Ceausescu figure. He had his balcony moment. They seized him, they put him up against the wall, they shot him, and then everybody else who were formerly his best pals repudiated the last 40 years in Romania. And all they have to repudiate here is the last 3 years, and they're getting close to it. Britain is the land where everything is policed except crime. So you can be a child sex slave, getting gang raped in Rotherham, Telford, Oldham, Oxford, Rochdale, Banbury, and the coppers will do nothing about it. But if, in between all the gang rape, you find time to misgender someone on Twitter, 5 officers will be round on your doorstep in nothing flat. We've run the videos all the time on this show. That's if they're not rehearsing, we've run these videos too, if they're not rehearsing the Macarena for Pride Month, which in the British Constabulary apparently lasts all year round, or even dancing the Macarena in support. Now, those are the Lincolnshire Police Macarena dancers, but then you get these other constabularies dancing the Macarena in support of the first constabulary who got criticised for dancing the Macarena, as the Northern Ireland constables did when they were dancing in London. Yeah, there they are. That's the Derry Macarena dancing. And that's even worse, I think. I'd have to give it to, if I were Len Goodman on Strictly, I'd give all the big points to the Lincolnshire Police over the Police Service of Northern Ireland. There's nothing in the Belfast Agreement about dancing the Macarena, and with good reason. Now, a new report calls for a return to Peelian principles, as in Sir Robert Peel, the founder of policing in the modern world. It's not clear to me officers on the beat even know who he is. Toby Young is the founder of the Free Speech Union and the editor-in-chief of the Daily Sceptic. Toby, what do you make of this report?
Yeah, well, this report is, I think it's pretty bad news for the police. The kind of headline finding is that there's a crisis of public confidence in the police. So in 2019, as recently as 2019, 70% of the British public thought the police were doing a good job. Today, that's fallen to 52%. And little wonder, because crime is at a 20-year high, and yet the police have never solved fewer crimes. So in 2015, I think 15.6% of recorded crimes resulted in either a summons or an arrest. Now that's fallen to 7.3%.
Well, you say 7.3. Palm Sandhu, when she was here the other day, said it's actually 1.3%. That's one reason why half these constabularies are being put under special orders, or whatever they call it, by...
Special measures.
Yeah, special measures by Her Majesty's Inspector. They're fudging these figures.
Well, that may be true. Even according to the official figures, some crimes, the rate at which they're solved is even lower than the official figure of 7.3%. So amongst burglaries, for instance, in Great Britain last year, only 3.5% of reported burglaries resulted in someone being arrested or summoned. And in some parts of the country, the record for solving burglaries is zero, a flat zero. And the diagnosis the public have made is that the police are more concerned with being woke than they are with solving crimes. Not surprising. You know, we've seen the video of the police in Lincoln dancing the Macarena while gangs of youths loot shops, you know, a few streets away. We saw the police take the knee when faced with riotous BLM protesters in 2020. Meanwhile, if you're an anti-lockdown protester, you know, you were subject to a baton charge, arrested and then hit with a massive fine. You know, the police are constantly participating in pride marches. They do nothing about Extinction Rebellion protests, Just Stop Oil protests, apart from giving the protesters water to make sure they're not getting too parched. They do nothing to protect statues from marauding mobs of left-wing students trying to tear them down. So it's little wonder, and as you said earlier, you know, if you misgender someone on Twitter, then you can expect, you know, to see some coppers come to your door. The Free Speech Union did some research into the number of people who've had non-crime hate incidents recorded against their names. And we think that between 2014, when they were first introduced by the College of Policing, until now, in England and Wales alone, it's about 250,000. That's an average of about 75 people a day being investigated for basically misgendering someone on Twitter. Not that surprising. They're not really solving any burglaries, auto theft, violent crimes. They're too busy policing our tweets.
The ideological thing is actually very corrosive of trust. I mentioned the police service of Northern Ireland a minute ago. The reason that exists is because the Royal Ulster Constabulary, whether it's true or not, was perceived to be more of a Protestant force than a Catholic force. Now, they had a hell of a job doing that, and in the end they were rewarded after whatever it was, 80 years, by being put out of business. Now, we have every other constabulary in the country on cultural issues taking one side over the other nakedly and openly. Why aren't those guys being put out of business?
I mean, someone said that the police have essentially become the paramilitary wing of The Guardian. They now see their job as enforcing woke orthodoxy. Policing thought crimes, not actually policing actual crimes. And it's bizarre, and as you say, it completely undermines public confidence in the police. I mean, you know, if you think that the police are, you know, biased in favour of one side of these various politically contentious debates, and you're not going to get a fair shout if you don't happen to parrot all the fashionable orthodoxies du jour, then of course you're going to lose confidence, lose trust in the police. And they don't seem to be, when they engage in these Macarena dances at Pride. They don't think of themselves, I don't think, as taking sides in a contentious political issue. They think these issues have now been resolved, and everyone is essentially a Guardian reader. Everyone flies a rainbow flag in their driveway, and we're merely reflecting the overwhelming public consensus. Well, no, actually, you're not.
Well, I think this was great at Manchester Police. While they were at the Pride Parade or whatever it was, somebody smashed the windscreen of their police car, and then they put this rather petulant tweet up saying, "Oh well, now we won't be able to patrol the streets because you smashed the window of our police car, so it's now going to have to go to the shop." Well, wait a minute, it's going to the shop every other month to be painted in rainbow colours for whatever Pride celebration you're having.
Yeah, I mean, I think the problem is there seems to be a real crisis of confidence in the police itself. You know, they used to be able to rely on common sense, on the Peelian principles that the Policy Exchange report recommends are brought back. But it's as though they've outsourced their thinking. They can no longer trust themselves to make simple, common-sense decisions. They've outsourced their thinking to organisations like Stonewall, Mermaids, Gendered Intelligence. It's as though all the attacks on the police by the Guardian reading left in the 70s and the 80s undermine their confidence. We are the baddies. We have to go through some kind of moral cleansing process, be re-educated, so we're no longer attacked by these left-wingers. We're no longer thought to be the bad guys. So they've now gone on all these diversity training courses. They festoon their police cars with rainbow colours. They go around with posters saying being offensive is an offence, and they see their role really as protecting beleaguered minorities as identified by The Guardian, rather than protecting the public from crime.
Yeah, that's great. The basic thing about Robert Peel was his great line, "The police are the public and the public are the police." And that was true. in this country and in other countries that adopted the British policing model, and it is not true in the United Kingdom in 2022. Thank you very much, Toby. It's always good to see you, and he's very good, Toby, and his organisation on all this misgendering stuff, because being offensive is not an offence. It is your right, and in fact it is one of the signs of a free society, the willingness to give offence and the willingness to take it. Coming up, Stump the Steyn, ask me anything you want, gbviews@gbnews.uk, and 2 words, Sue Cook. Don't touch that dial, Sue will be here in just a moment.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Back in the spring of 2020, a couple of weeks into lockdown, I saw that some unfortunate ne'er-do-well in Singapore had become the first man in the history of the world to be sentenced to death by Zoom call. And he didn't seem a terribly nice chap, but I felt a bit sorry for him because there seemed something especially pathetic in being condemned to hang via video conferencing. And I wondered whether the judge had bothered getting out the old black cap to direct that the convicted man be taken to the place of execution and there hanged by the neck until you are dead, and may God have mercy upon your soul. Or whether, as with so many other Zoom calls, as we were to learn, the judge was just sitting in his rec room with his pajama bottoms under his robe. And I'm not facing execution or anything, but I have a long-running lawsuit in America, and we had a scheduling conference via Zoom a few months ago, and the judge was sitting there in slacks and an open-necked shirt, and I didn't like to complain because these yank judges can be very vindictive if they take against you, but his slacks, for me, didn't really embody the full majesty of the law. Lockdown has supposedly ended, but normality has not returned, even to areas of life that were generally immune to passing fancies, such as our law courts. On Monday, criminal barristers in England and Wales begin a continuous, uninterrupted strike, which sounds like a comedy sketch with bewigged scabs. Look at them all, the strikers in... Have you ever seen strikers in court dress? Look at that, they're striking in their... What do they call those collars? Jabots, I think? They're striking in their wigs and jabots. I've never seen that before. It's like so much in the last 2 years I've never seen before. It's like it's part of the general disintegration of all norms in our fragile system. Not just the courts, but also the jails. The number of prison officers has fallen by 15%. Sue Cook, you know from Crime Watch, You and Yours, Children in Need, but her big hits shouldn't obscure the other stuff, like Out of Court, which Sue used to present on the BBC. You never had to contend with a strike by barristers in those days, did you?
I don't think we did, no. I don't think, of all the professions, they were the least likely to go on strike. But I think junior barristers, I have to say, have a pretty tough time of it now.
Well, they make about 12 grand a year.
I've heard of it being as low as that.
Yeah.
I think 12% earn as much as 30 grand, and I think something like 25% might even go up to 60. But it's a hard life. It's not a social life. I mean, they're dealing with pretty hardcore things, like knife crime and sexual assaults and so on. And because they're juniors, they get all the rubbish thrown at them, so they're very likely to get home from one day in court and be told that they've got to prepare another case so they're up all night preparing the case for tomorrow. They might have to travel 20 miles or so to do that day, and then they're quite likely to get another case to prepare overnight. And if you've got a family and social life to manage, it's not always that bad, but it can be that bad as a junior barrister.
But everybody thinks, Sue, that they do. Oh yeah, that you have it tough when you're starting out, but that's because you're going to wind up a QC with silk and all the rest of it, living the life, and so they're not a group you would. It's not like train drivers or. I mean, it's hard to have great, huge public sympathy for barristers.
Same with the junior doctors as well, isn't it? The same sort of argument, which has some merit to it, but it is quite tough. I mean, they've got a good settlement now arranged, 15%, which is worth about £7,000 on average a year. But the trouble is, there's a 60,000 plus backlog of cases, and they're not going to allow them to have the pay rise until they've got through the 60,000. So the more they go on strike, the greater the backlog's going to be. So how we solve that one, I don't know.
Do you think it's going to resonate though at a time when we were talking earlier the price cap? I think the highest bid we had now it's up over £8,000 by April next year. For being able to switch your light on. Do you think in that sort of a world people are going to be, we back the barristers?
No, maybe not. But I mean, the problem is that, the courts are now going to be completely snarled up. So I have a horrible suspicion that a lot of criminals are just walking free because they're not getting their trials. The courts can't handle them. Maybe that's why, as Toby was saying, maybe that's why they're all concentrating on thought crime and they're not actually giving people jail sentences or charging people.
You know a lot of that because of your Crime Watch days. And Crime Watch, that kind of a show depends to a certain extent on the cooperation of you certainly had friendly relations with chief superintendents and other spokespersons on that show. I mean, I don't even know whether you could do a show like that now. Well, I mean, what would you be having the chief constable on to talk about how he's very concerned that misgendering is getting out of control in rural Norfolk? I mean, what kind of crime show would you be doing in the UK?
I don't know. That was more of the out of court programme I did. That would have covered that, I suppose, rather than specific crimes. But yes, I don't know whether you can imagine that at all. But it's just the whole judicial system seems to me to be a crisis waiting to happen. And I hate doom mongering, but it's not the sort of thing I like to do. But I really do see the situation in prisons is terrible. 15% of prison officers have already left. Another 25 are projected to leave, 25% by the end of next year. And it's the senior ones that are going. So you're left with quite junior prison officers whose job it is to train the next lot of junior prison officers coming in. So you're getting inexperienced officers training inexperienced officers. They haven't got the confidence. they are really scared of the prisoners. The prisoners during lockdowns were shut up for hours on end. So the normal kind of input of education and socialisation and jobs to do within the prison and indeed outside, they all went by the board with lockdown. So there was more self-harm, more violence in prisons because the guys were shut up all the time. The probation service, that's been really affected too. A lot of the probation service was done on Zoom or Skype or by phone, which isn't the same.
No.
And then when prisoners finally leave, they haven't had any input, they haven't had this education or work or anything, so they've got to somehow, on their own, again, because the probation service is overstretched, they've got to find their own job, their own place to live, and they'll probably be back in jail again, you know.
Well, I think there's been a whole a general lessening of the protections of justice in the fullest sense. I don't mean protecting criminals or whatever, but I think there is a difference between if you're, say, in jail and you've got an appeal, and the day of your appeal they give you a suit and tie to put on and you're put in the back of a van and driven to stand before the judges. I don't think that works if they're doing it by Zoom. So I think all that actually is prejudicial all these modifications are prejudicial, I think.
So a lot of the lockdowns have set up these prejudicial kind of new ways of doing things, which I have a horrible feeling won't get back to normal ever.
No.
And also the people who suffer are victims of crime too. I was hearing this morning on the radio that a 13-year-old girl who was raped 2 years ago, and her trial was finally coming up, and the whole family being geared up for this, you know, very stressful. And she was told at the last minute, sorry, we can't have your day in court after all. It's going to be 9 months now before you get back into court. That's nearly another year. That would have been, this girl would be 16 by the time, you know, and who knows, it might get nudged on again. But
no, that's an absolutely terrible, and that's as basic as it gets, that you have the right to face your accuser in court, and they shouldn't be taking that away. I always think of you and the shows you've done. They're shows that require a kind of elemental curiosity about what's going on and a kind of doggedness to get behind it and figure it out. And I don't hear that on the BBC these days. There's not a lot of investigative journalism of the kind that you did on those shows. Is that how you feel about it?
I would give anything to be doing Out of Court again, where we'd be out doing these very stories and actually looking at the extent of the damage that's being done and the damage that's going to be done down the line, because I can see that there's a huge knock-on effect that's only going to gather momentum. And yeah, if I'd been, you know, back in the day when investigative journalism was much more of a thing, then yeah, we'd have been doing it, and people would at least know about it and see the train crash coming, and perhaps put the buffers up first.
I get the feeling that certain stories don't interest them because they're kind of slightly at odds with the like if you take the last 2 years, we've all supposed to be rah-rah for standing together, you know, banging our pots and pans for the NHS. It's hard then to actually turn around and say, well, no, wait a minute, now we're going to be objective journalists again investigating this stuff.
Maybe that is a problem. I don't know. Everything seems to have got a bit deconstructed, and it's very hard to reconstruct it. And as Toby was saying, that there's a lot of confidence loss, and confidence in the media, confidence in the police, confidence in the judicial system, confidence in so many things. And it's we need to cheer ourselves up and get that confidence going again.
Yeah, that doesn't leave a lot of things. I had confidence in fish and chip shops, and then I heard that 1 in 3 of them are now closing because of the energy costs. Thank you very much, Sue. I think we can just close it out with one stump. What's this? Train leaves Brussels at 11 a.m. averaging 60 miles an hour. Another train headed in the opposite direction leaves Brussels at 1 p.m. To the nearest mile. How far are the two trains from each other at 3 p.m.? Well, that's the wrong question, Marcelo, because one of the trains is hijacked by asylum seekers and driven onto a Border Force ferry. That's going to do it. Dan Wotton's here to give it some Wednesday welly. What you got, Dan?
Good evening, Marco. I love Sue. What a brilliant woman she is. Shame the BBC's not like that anymore. Yes. And we've got Rod Liddell here on that very topic tonight.
No, we all love Sue. You're right there.
Yeah, absolutely. Plus, Brendan O'Neill on Shamima Begum, and Widdicombe, she's going to be marking Boris Johnson's report card. I have a feeling she's probably quite a tough marker. Penny Mordaunt is live in the studio on why she's backing Liz Truss. So it's a big show ahead.
Oh, great. Penny Mordaunt, that's all coming up after the weather. I tell you what, Dan is such a big Sue Cook fan. We're going to get Dan and Sue to co-present a revised version out of court on GB News. It's starting in 2 weeks' time. Stick around for Dan and stay safe, stay free.
Hi, I'm Alex Deakin with your latest weather update from the Met Office. Tomorrow is another dry, fine day for the vast majority with sunny spells, probably feeling a little bit warmer for most, although first thing it will still be fairly chilly under this area of high pressure. Most will have a fine and a largely clear night, but there's a couple of weather fronts that are kind of just closing in, and they will bring a change come Friday and into the weekend. But for the time being, as I said, most places dry and fine. There are one or two scattered showers over northern England this evening, but they're fading away. Most will have a dry night, just a small chance of one or two more showers coming back into eastern England. Generally, clear skies, and temperatures will drop down to single figures across Scotland. A fresh start here. Further south, perhaps a little warmer than last night. Towns and cities staying in the teens in places. Dry and fine for most on Thursday with sunny spells. Small chance of one or two showers along the south coast of England. Perhaps a greater chance of one or two over eastern parts of England, maybe southeast Scotland. But again, the vast majority will stay dry. The showers few and far between. Bit of a breeze blowing across the south again, but temperatures in the mid-20s here and up to 20 Celsius across Scotland and Northern Ireland. So a touch warmer than today. As we go through Thursday evening, though, a greater likelihood of seeing some showers spreading up across southern parts of England into Wales and across the Midlands. Some heavy ones are possible, most likely